We're holding Perek Chavtet, chapter 29, Sefer Mishlei. Just give a quick introduction. As I've mentioned in the past, from time to time we come across individuals who are called by different names to describe their personalities, their attitude, their way of thinking. Many of us are familiar with the terms Rasha and Tzaddik, an evil man, a righteous man, but we don't really, we don't really understand it or use it properly. We think of it as perhaps as an individual who's a Rasha is the worst man in the world. He's done all the sins in the world. A Tzaddik is a person who only does Ma'asim Tovim. And as you will see, that's not necessarily so. Because what we're going to be dealing with is certain attitudes that if one falls under that category, if one behaves in a certain way, he is called a Tzaddik just for that alone. Or he is called a Rasha for doing a particular deed. In other words, certain deeds or certain attitudes either belong to a Rasha or belong to a Tzaddik. That's important to remember because Shlomo Melech is speaking to the various individuals, and if anyone recognizes that particular type of attitude in himself, then he should know that that is associated with a Tzaddik or with a Rasha. Pasuk Aleph. Ish tochachot makshe oref Peta yishaver ve'en marpeh. A man who requires reproof but stiffens his nape, he translates here, will suddenly be broken without cure. A man who requires reproof. Who's a man that requires reproof? One who is not doing things the right way. And as a result of that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends him all sorts of signals that we call Yisurim, pain, disease. And the right thing to do is for one to examine himself and to correct whatever it is that he can correct. After all, what are the Yisurim for? Yisurim are only intended for two things: to atone, to remove the stains that are in the neshama, plus they act as signals to wake us up. But one who has a stiff nape, as he calls it here, one who's stubborn, and he's getting all this tochacha, and instead of thinking about what he can do, he's bo'et b'yisurim, a term that the rabbis use. Bo'et b'yisurim means literally to kick, to rebel against the Yisurim. He has no cure. As he says over here, Peta yishaver ve'en marpeh. He will suddenly be broken without cure. It will be very difficult for him to ever do teshuvah, for him ever to take the necessary steps to cure himself, because either he will believe that it is all a mikre, it is all a coincidence, what is happening to him, or he simply will rebel against it. He will have complaints about it. He will not focus on what he needs to focus, and that is his weaknesses, whatever it is that he's doing wrong. And Shlomo Melech reminds us that anytime there is Yisurim, anytime there is Tochacha Mishamayim, it's for a reason, it's for a purpose. And one who has an attitude that this is all a coincidence, that this does not make sense, I don't agree with it, I don't deserve it, all the excuses that one can say will not get him anywhere. Because in the end, ve'en marpeh, he will have a difficult time recovering from it. Everybody wants to recover, everybody wants to go on and living a normal life. And if he's deep in a situation which is difficult, hopefully he would learn the lessons, the necessary lessons, and do what's necessary to get out of the problem. But not everybody will learn the lessons. So Shlomo Melech is reminding us that just for your knowledge, for your information, there are individuals out there who ve'en marpeh. There's almost no cure for them. It's hard to say that about someone, that he has no cure. Very difficult to say. It's like you're sounding a pessimistic note. What do you mean he has no cure? Well, that's exactly what happens to those individuals who are stiff-naped. And that is what the Torah warns us very much. Am Yisrael, the Jewish nation, is a very stubborn nation. And the stubbornness gets in our way. It's good to be stubborn sometimes too. But when it comes to Tochacha, the Torah Kedusha is very, very severe with one who does not learn the lesson, because what will happen eventually is that these lessons will have to be intensified. And who wants to go through that? But unfortunately, some people have it in a very, very, difficult way. They receive a large dose of it because they're very stiff-necked. Pasuk Bet. ברבות צדיקים ישמח העם ומשול רשע ינח עם. when the righteous become great, the people rejoice, but when the wicked man rules, the people sigh. This may be familiar to you. There are quite a few Pesukim in Mishlei that have a very similar theme. Some ideas are repeated for greater emphasis. There's always something being added. And he's mentioned this in the past. So literally, it means that when tzaddikim are in power, they're in a position, the people, of course, do better. Hashem is happier. Hashem blesses the people, the nation, the land. Uvimshol rasha yenacham. But when a wicked man rules, the people sigh. And that has various interpretations. I mean, first of all, he's a wicked man, so the people will suffer. He's not kind. Plus, the whole nation, the whole land can suffer as a result of him being the leader. He represents the people. If he doesn't conduct himself properly, everybody will suffer the consequences. But the rabbis tell us that what Shlomo Melech is also insinuating here is about the various episodes in our history where certain individuals came to power either for the good or for the bad. The example that they use is Haman on the one hand and Mordechai ve'Esther on the other hand. Virvot tzadikim yismach ha'am. That's talking about Mordechai ve'Esther that came to power, were able to achieve whatever it was that they achieved. For what purpose? What was their contribution to Am Yisrael? To get Am Yisrael to accept the Torah b'simcha, with happiness and joy and willingly. This is a time, Purim is a time when Am Yisrael recommitted themselves to receive the Torah mitzvot, but this time with joy, not with fear, like they did in Ma'amad Har Sinai, where it was so obvious. They heard the voice of Hashem, and the Midrash says it was like putting a mountain over their heads. So Purim was a time to recommit themselves, especially since they became a little bit slack after the destruction of the first temple, doing what they did in Persia, and bringing on themselves the threat of annihilation, chas v'shalom. So Mordechai ve'Esther come into the scene to elevate Am Yisrael to a height of recommitting themselves to Torah mitzvot and doing so with joy. Haman comes to power to do what? Just the opposite, to threaten them, to wake them up, to make them realize that there's something wrong with what they're doing. So that is part of the meaning of what he's trying to say here. Birvot tzadikim yismach ha'am. In the end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings the tzaddik into a position to make the people grow, to bring joy to the nation. Uvimshol rasha yenach ha'am. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings a rasha, a wicked man, into power, into position of power, so that he should cause anaha, grief and sorrow, and make people, do something about about their ma'asim, awaken them with tshuva. And that is why historically there were many tyrants, not just Haman, but many tyrants, including one or two today, who appear to be a threat to Am Yisrael. And what's the purpose? The same idea is to awaken Am Yisrael that we better do teshuvah. The next pasuk, Ish oev chokhmah yisamach aviv v'ro'eh zonot ya'abed hon. A man who loves wisdom makes his father happy, but one who keeps company with harlots wastes his wealth. In other words, with prostitutes. There appears to be no connection here between the first part of the pasuk and the second half of the pasuk. First half of the pasuk talks about chokhmah. A man who loves chokhmah, who loves wisdom, will gladden his father. That is an idea that he has already expressed in the past. Like there's a pasuk, there's another similar pasuk. If one son is a chacham, it gladdens the heart of the father. It obviously brings a lot of nachat, a lot of happiness to a parent if their son is a wise son. And Shlomo Melech puts a lot of emphasis on the importance of chokhmah, on pursuing knowledge. Not because knowledge is so important in itself, but because he's teaching us or guiding us what we should want, what we should pursue. For example, just to elaborate a little bit more, rabbis put an emphasis on who one should marry. A man should marry the daughter of a Talmid Chacham. A father should marry off his daughter to a Talmid Chacham. But not everybody ends up marrying a Bat Talmid Chacham. Well, not everybody is lucky to marry off his daughter to a Talmid Chacham, right? So what are they saying? The rabbis at least are telling us that this is what you should strive for. This is what you should want. This is what you should desire. Not the money, not the beauty, not the career of the boy, like many people are looking. Is he a doctor? Does he drive a BMW? It's foolish. But people are actually looking for these things. This is what they want. Not is he a mensch, is he a kind person? Does he have good midot, refined character, ben Torah? They're not looking, I mean, obviously they would want that too, but that's not their priority. Shlomo Melech puts a tremendous priority in wisdom. Otherwise, if you lack the wisdom, you can, Chas v'shalom, one can fall into another category of kasil, of foolishness, of emptiness. And these are different kinds of lifestyles. The lifestyle of one who is a chacham, one who has studied Torah, and one who has not. So he says that an individual who pursues, and he should pursue chokhmah, will bring happiness to his father. But look what happens to the other individual. Ro'ez onot yabed hon. One who I guess spends his time with harlots, with prostitutes, he will lose hon. Hon means tremendous wealth. Yonatan ben Uziel says over here that he will ruin his mazal. His mazal will be ruined by associating with these prostitutes. Simple meaning, some say, is, well, they will take away his money. If that's the habit that he has, that's the bad habit that he has, this is his weakness, it's going to be very expensive, just like smoking. You know, when you smoke a lot, you're burning your money. Imagine if you smoke 5 packs a day. I don't know of anybody that smokes 5 packs, but I'm sure there are. That's very expensive, yes.
Isn't it a huge affair to do that?
Of course. Yeah, of course it's a huge avera. But what he's saying over here is not only the avera involved here, he's talking about destroying his mazal. He will lose his hon. That will be a tremendous loss for him, what he's doing, this habit that he has. Plus the literal meaning of losing his wealth. And the commentaries also say, Yabed hon, he will lose his Torah. He will lose all the Torah that he could have learned, or that he did learn, by associating himself with zonot. The connection between the two is obviously one who pursues chokhmah will not pursue an empty life, a life that is full of ta'avot, of desires, of an emphasis on the bodily needs. He's more interested in chokhmah. One who is empty of chokhmah, that is fertile ground for the yetzer to take over, and for him to begin pursuing all these forbidden things. Melech b'mishpat ya'amid aretz ve'ish terumot yihersena. A king establishes the country with justice, but a haughty man tears it down. What is he talking about over here? What does it mean he establishes it with justice? Various interpretations. Some say that in order for a melech, for a king to succeed, he has to be matun. He has to be deliberate, not rush to judgment, kind, righteous. He really has to have an interest in the people. And included in that is not to raise taxes in an excessive way. That's what the commentaries say. Because if you come down very hard on the citizens, you will not last long. So Shlomo Melech, being a king, is giving advice to kings. Listen, you want your kingdom to last, and remember Shlomo Melech's reign, for the most part, was very good. It lasted for quite a bit of time. It was one of the best times, if not the best time, for the Jewish people, where they were at peace, they were prosperous, everything was pretty calm. A lot depends, therefore, on who the king is. Whereas ve'ish terumot yihersena, a haughty man, that's one interpretation. An arrogant man can destroy an otherwise good thing. But before we get to that interpretation of an arrogant man, the other meaning of ish terumot is just the opposite of melech b'mishpat. Here you have one king who is just, who is kind, who is giving. Then you have an individual called ish terumot. What's an ish terumot? In Yiddish we would call him a schnorrer. You know what that means? One who's trying to find any way possible to take money from people. He wants terumot. He wants terumot for himself. He raises taxes, accepts bribes, right? This kind of an attitude will bring down his government, will bring down his reign. The other interpretation is Melech b'mishpat Ya'amid, is talking about Melech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He set up the world in an organized fashion, in a just way. It is human beings who destroy it. And which human being does he have in mind over here that destroys? An arrogant man. So Ish Terumot can also be talking about an arrogant man. As a result of arrogance, what happens? He's interested in himself. He's looking out for himself and not for his constituents, not for the citizens. And we've spoken about it many, many times. The politicians, as soon as they come to power, that's what they worry about. Is what do I need to do to get re-elected? Not what I need to do for the better of the people, to better their lives. So here you have a situation where everything could be good and just and right, and comes along an individual and can destroy all this good work by being an ish terumot, by being interested more in himself. This is a message, of course, for all generations, for all governments, that it's very easy to destroy a government, to have a government fall down. It is very easy. All it takes is a couple of individuals, or maybe even one, who's not really interested in what's good for the people, but what's good for himself. And this kind of corruption can bring down any government. After all, look at Spain and Portugal, look at all the empires in the past. Isn't it interesting that they have all collapsed and they're all poor today? I mean, what happened? What went wrong? If you look deep into their situation, is that they did not put an emphasis on education of their kids, of giving over the correct values to the future generation. There was corruption, and that's how governments fall apart. Assassinations, the king doesn't last long, and therefore they are weak, and somebody else takes them over and conquers them. They don't last long. There's no beracha in their actions. So therefore, what you have over here is a melech b'mishpat, or one who's not b'mishpat, but accepts bribery and tolerates corruption. One will last and one will not. Next pasuk. Gever mahlik al re'eu reshet pores al pe'amav. A man who flatters his friend spreads out a net for his feet. Also several interpretations. Either we're talking about somebody who flatters instead of criticizing. There are times that one needs to criticize, to point out the faults and what is wrong with what someone is doing. If you accept it, if you don't say anything, then you are ruining him. You're causing, directly or indirectly, him to fall. You are laying the net, as he calls it over here. You are spreading the net for his feet by flattering him instead of telling him, hey, this is wrong. This is what you should do. So that's one interpretation, a very important idea that many times we observe someone who we're very close to, and we have the ability to say something, we need to say something. We can't ignore it. Otherwise, we are at fault for whatever it is that he's doing wrong. The other idea of Gever Mahalik al-Re'eu is a pasuk that we've seen before, that one who wants to make his friend fall, he wants to set up a trap for his friend, he wants to cheat his friend, in the end he's spreading the net for himself. Just like Haman brought a tree to hang Mordechai, and in the end what happened? He was hanged on his own tree. So Gever Mahlik al-Re'eu wants to make his friend fall, wants to make his friend trip. He's really spreading the net for himself. In the end, it will be his downfall. Now these things exist. These people actually live amongst us. In every generation you have people like that. You have individuals who want to take advantage, who want to get someone. They want to get his money. And they will flatter him, they will try to get close to him, or they will try to convince him about something, a shady deal. You have to obviously be careful with these people. But Shlomo Melech is warning anybody who's thinking in that direction that it doesn't pay. Crime does not pay. Never does. Next pasuk. Befesha ish ra mokesh v'tzadik yarun v'sameach. Also similar idea. When a wicked man sins, there is a snare, and the righteous man sings and rejoices. What does it mean there's a snare? Mokesh. The simple meaning is that he is, by committing a sin, he's ensnaring himself. He's putting a mokesh for himself. As the rabbis tell us in the pasuk, "Mipi alyon lo tetzeh haraot." We read it in Megillat Echan Tisha B'Av. From above, nothing bad comes down. But people are suffering. What do you call that? We've been trained that everything is for the good. But what about those things that it's obviously no good? I mean, how do you deal with that? It's really hard suffering for, if somebody's going through very terrible disease. What do you call that? Even though it's good in the end, but right now it doesn't appear to be good. And if from above nothing bad comes down, then what is this? It was not sent from above. We brought it on ourselves. In other words, Mipi elyon lo tetzeh haraot only means that Hashem does not just send it down for no reason. We bring it upon ourselves. That is what he's saying over here. It's a mokesh for himself. Befesha ishra mokesh. As a result of one's sins, he's ensnaring himself. There's a snare. In other words, he himself is to blame for whatever mokesh that he has. But a tzaddik and righteous man sings and rejoices. Why does he sing and rejoice? Because he did not fall in the same trap. He avoided the Rasha. He did not become his partner. He did not come close to him. And this, of course, brings to mind the famous expression that the rabbis use, Oy le Rasha ve'oy le shcheno. Woe to a wicked man and woe to his neighbor. In other words, if you happen to be a neighbor of a Rasha, you may suffer the consequences. You don't want to live around bad people, because we may not have enough merits to save ourselves if we're around bad people. The best thing to do, as the Rambam says, is get out of town. Move. Don't be around bad people if everybody's bad. Go live in the deserts and in caves, he says, if the whole world would be bad. You don't want to be around bad people, because one will suffer the same fate as they do. We're not even talking about influence right now. We're talking about suffering the fate. If Hashem comes down hard on them, and we're living in a bad place. I mean, imagine if one was living where the tsunami struck. I mean, I don't want to try to explain why it struck and what happened, but obviously it's only Hashemayim. What would we say? Ole Rasha ve'ole shcheno. What are you doing there? And that's true anywhere. One has to be careful where he's living, with who he associates. He should not be part of their mazal, their destiny. So the tzaddik here rejoices because he does not come close to living with the Rasha. He does not come to do any business with the Rasha. He's not his partner. Therefore he has reason to rejoice when he sees that Baruch Hashem, he was not affected by the same fate that the Rasha had. Next pasuk, Yodea tzaddik din dalim, Rasha lo yavin da'at. Very important pasuk. A righteous man knows the judgment of the poor. A wicked man does not put his mind to knowing it. What are we talking about? We're talking about empathy here. The best English word for describing this pasuk is empathy. Does everybody understand here what the word empathy means? There's sympathy and there's empathy. To empathize with someone means to understand what he's going through, to feel for him, and to try to help him. That is a beautiful midah. Do you know that not anybody could be a nurse? You know what a nurse is, what they have to do? I know there's a lot of nurses out there who are probably very indifferent. They're so used to what they're doing. If the sick man pushes on the button, maybe they don't come right away. It could be too. I mean, there's all kinds of people working in hospitals. But usually one who wants to be a nurse, does not do so for the money. They really like the job. They want to help people. I think so. I mean, I may be wrong, but that's what I think. It's a beautiful job. It requires a lot of patience, and more than just patience. To be kind, to help. And some nurses, of course, have to do things that most of us maybe would never want to do. Imagine cleaning the diaper of an old man. I don't know exactly who does it, who takes care of these things, who ends up doing it. But people who are very, very sick in the hospitals need a lot of help. And it takes a very special person to be able to do that kind of work. Because if you're not interested in helping, you shouldn't be doing that job. As one rabbi a teacher was once asked, why did you become a teacher? Because it pays well.
You don't deserve to be a teacher. You shouldn't be a teacher. You have no business teaching Jewish children if that's the reason why you became a teacher. Who should want to become a teacher? One who's interested in teaching children Torah. Otherwise, why is he teaching? He's not going to be doing a good job if he's always interested in making money. How many people are eager to go home from their job? They're not too happy with what they're doing. They're doing it because they have no choice. What a shame. Ideally, one should be doing what he enjoys doing because he will excel. He will be devoted to it. So that's why Shlomo Melech here talks about the importance of empathy. And the way he describes the empathy here is Yodea Tzaddik Din Dalim. The Tzaddik recognizes, a righteous man recognizes the judgment of the poor. And what that means is that he empathizes with them, he understands their pain and their plight. He knows what the poor man is going through. This is a very important attitude when somebody knocks on your door for money. Do you know what his story is? A lot of people don't have the patience to listen. Okay, here, take. It could be that he has a very, very sad story. He could have left behind 11 children and a wife who's pregnant. Well, who knows how many debts he has? Maybe the bank wants to take away his home because he hasn't paid his debts, or maybe the electric company wants to shut off the electricity because he hasn't paid the utility bill. I hear these stories all the time. All sorts of stories that we don't really come across here. But these people have many, many problems. And there are people who have told me that if I don't pay this debt back, they're going to send somebody to beat me up. As soon as they, whenever I walk in, not myself, whenever these people walk in the street, they have to look out. Maybe somebody, one of his debtors who's not patient, is going to come after him. They have a lot of fears, a lot of worries and problems to deal with. And that is the meaning of this pasuk. Yodea tzaddik din dalim. A person who is a tzaddik. What did we say before? We shouldn't misunderstand tzaddik. Tzaddik does not mean that he does only mitzvot, no averot, spotless. Of course, that he's a tzaddik too. Tzaddik, the Rambam says, is one who does more mitzvot than he does averot. The tzaddik that Shlomo Melech is talking about is the man who has the positive, the right attitude in dealing with certain situations. He's a tzaddik when he handles that correctly. He empathizes with the dal. He understands what he's going through, and he helps him. Rasha, who is a Rasha? Who has the attitude of a Rasha? Lo yavin dat. He doesn't pay attention. He couldn't care less. He ignores. Anybody who ignores, does not want to listen, does not want to attempt to help the individual, that is the attitude of a Rasha, not of a tzaddik. Pasuk Het. Anshe latzon yafihu kirya v'chachamim yashivu af. Scornful men inflame a city, but the wise turn away wrath. Actually, maybe perhaps before we go to that pasuk, just a few more ideas about Yodea Tzaddik Din Dalim. The rabbis tell us in the Midrash, I think, that it's also talking about a Kadosh Baruch Hu who has pity on a dog. Because Hashem has pity on a dog, He made the dog in a way that any food that he ingests remains in his stomach for 3 days. Why? Because he can't find food so easily. It's not like mice or cats even, who will just go and eat and get into anywhere they can and find some food. A dog has a harder time finding food. As a result of that, Hashem, of course, is a Rahman and merciful, and He creates him in such a way that the food will remain in his system for 3 days. So, if a Nekelef Hashem has... Another, perhaps, idea that one can add over here is that sometimes we see a poor man acting in a way that is not right. You have to be very, very careful in judging him, because it's very possible that he's doing as a result of his poverty, as a result of his situation, that is driving him crazy. So one has to judge favorably and try to be understanding of a poor man more so than of somebody else. If he's doing something strange, it could be that he's doing it because of his aniyut. Another interpretation of the words Rasha, lo yavin dat, is that Rasha is always complaining. He is never happy with his situation. As the pasuk says, Beten Reshaim Tehsar, the stomachs of the wicked are always empty, they're always lacking, they always want more, they're never happy. The next pasuk, Anshe latzon yafichu kirya v'chachamim yashivu af. Scornful men inflame a city, but the wise men turn away wrath. We're talking about scornful men. There are individuals out there that all they do is yafichu kirya. What's yafichu kirya? They inflame a city. At all times, what they do is cause fighting. They bring about mahloket, arguments, division. Here he calls it yafichu kirya. They inflame a city. They get everybody upset. And in Hebrew, this is called lecharcher riv, to cause or bring about fighting. The scornful people who are not serious about life, irresponsible people, that's what they do. That's what they're interested in. That's their attitude. V'chachamim yashivu af. What is the attitude of a chacham, of a wise man? Is to make peace, not to make a fight, not to make an argument. You may have heard that there are individuals in this country, and many, who will look for any opportunity to sue. Does that sound familiar? This country, after all, is where the most lawsuits you have. Sue the doctors, sue the contractors, sue the neighbor, sue everybody. For anything, for malpractice, for whatever it is that you can think of, whether it's true or not true. They try to sue. That's a form of argument, that's a form of bickering, that's a form of being scornful perhaps of the system, of people, being not respectful of people's privacy, their rights. You know how much pain this causes? Even if in the end you win. The attorney fees, the aggravation. One has to be very, very careful with this. But there are people who that's what they do. They look for any opportunity to sue or to cause anguish to another individual. And it doesn't have to be in court, it could be beddin also. To go to a beddin day after day for every little silly thing that they're not happy with their neighbor, they're going to take him to beddin. Yeah, people have to realize that certain things it's just better to give in and not to pick a fight. But some people like to pick fights day after day. Their whole life is full of fighting. They fight with the whole world. They have no friends. They only have enemies. And they're not liked because they get a name of being scornful, of being balei machloket, and so forth. And that's the individual that he's talking about over here. Anshe latzon yafichu kirya. That's what they do. They like to cause machloket. They like to cause scandals. But chachamim yashivu af. There's two meanings to the second half of the pasuk. The chachamim not only try to settle matters, they try to make peace. They try to bring forth solutions that there shouldn't be machloket. Plus, the chachamim yashivu af is they try to turn away the anger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is all their efforts and time are spent to be mevatel gezerot, to annul decrees. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be happy with us. If something is not right in the community, they get together and say, let's all fast, let's all pray, let's all say Tehillim. That is their attitude. They don't make fun. They're serious. They're responsible. And that's, of course, what we should adopt to ourselves. He's not just stating a fact here. He's reminding us that this is what we need to do as well. We have to be careful from individuals who are interested in mahloket. We have to stay away from mahloket at any cost. It only produces terrible results. Rarely does anything good come out of mahloket. Well, we have to adopt what the chachamim do. Lashiv af, to make peace between husband and wife, between friends, between neighbors. That is the correct way. That is the way of the chachamim. Next pasuk. Ish chacham nishpat et ish evil v'ragaz v'sachak ve'nachat. I like this pasuk. You'll see why in a moment. When a wise man contends with a foolish man, whether he's angry or he laughs, he will have no contentment. When it comes to an ish evil, he calls it a foolish man, but evil is not so foolish. A kesil is a fool. Evil is someone who is a mixture of wicked and a fool. He's a bad person. He's not a good man. A troublemaker. An evil. So a chacham who tries to argue or get into a discussion with an evil, he says, forget it. No matter what he does, ragaz or sahak and nahat. Whether he laughs with him and shows him, I'm your friend. whether he yells at him, he's upset at him, ragaz, en nachat, forget it. You have no way of winning the fight. With certain individuals, you will never win because they're evilim. Whether you befriend them and you laugh with them or you're upset at them, no matter what technique you use, there's no hope for that. So Chacham, therefore, he's better off not arguing with one who has the reputation of being an evil. Next pasuk, Anshei damim yisneu tam v'yisharim yivakshu nafsho. Also a very interesting pasuk. He translates it here, murderous men hate the innocent, but the upright seek his soul. Anshei damim yisneu tam, the commentaries explain, people befriend those that are similar to themselves. People become friends with those who are like them. So Anshei damim, murderous men, as he calls them here, do not like one who's a good man, one who's a good citizen, one who does things upright. They can't get along because he's not like them. They will not like somebody who's good. V'yisharim yivakshu nafsho. But those who are righteous, those who are upright, will seek his soul, will want to become his friend. And this, of course, is similar to the idea of tell me who your friend is and I'll tell you who you are, because people associate or befriend those who are like them. So you don't want to be, of course, a friend of someone who's very opposite to you in his way of thinking. But what's the point of what he's telling us over here? It's very important, because if these are the friends of these individuals who are no good, then maybe these individuals are no good either. This happens from time to time. Somebody hears a knock on his door. Who is it? It's the FBI. How can I help you? Well, your name and phone number appear in a list of an individual who was caught smuggling drugs. So, well, since your name and phone number are on his list, maybe you were a friend of his, and maybe you did business with him, and maybe you're just as bad as him. So we have to investigate you too. And they do that all the time. That is the way they have leads, and that is the way they go through finding out who's connected with who. They look at the phone numbers, lists, addresses, they're on the computer, anything they can find. You're connected with him. Maybe you're more than just connected. Maybe not. We don't want to be connected with the wrong people. Pasuk Yud Aleph, Kol rucho yotzi chesil v'chacham ve'achor yishabbechena. A fool lets out all his wind, but afterwards a wise man will quiet it. And that is talking about an individual who doesn't think before he acts. He lets out all his wind. Whereas a chacham be'achor yishabbechena, he can only evaluate the situation only after that he has performed it. He doesn't even know until he has done something if it really worked or not. That is a chacham. Doesn't talk too much before he does something. Doesn't make promises if he doesn't know that he can keep the promise. So the attitude of a kesil, again, we're talking about a kesil of a fool, is to talk nonsense, is to say things without thinking about it, to do things without fully evaluating the consequences. Rabbis tell us in Pirkei Avot, Ezu chacham haro'eh et hanolad. A true chacham always weighs his actions before he does them, because he doesn't want to have the wrong results. So he looks at the future. What kind of a future? At the consequences. What may be the potential consequences of these actions? He's a true chacham. A kesil acts impulsively without analyzing the situation. Pasuk Yud Bet. Moshel makshiv al dvar shaker kol mesharetav reshaim. Also very interesting pasuk, talking again about kings and rulers. And here he's saying that a ruler who hearkens to false words, all his servants are wicked. What he's really trying to say, what does the servants have to do with the moshel? They will all be like him. If the moshel makshiv al devar shaker, if he listens to that which is false, if he accepts falsehood, if he accepts corruption, then kol mesharetav reshaim, then all his servants, all the citizens of this country will adapt this way too. They will also be reshaim. If the leader is like that, rabbis tell us that that is a mirror image of the people. Kol dor, in every generation, there are leaders that represent the people. They are one of the people, and they are just like the people. They're not better, necessarily. In other words, they were chosen because they can handle this generation. They're not too much above them and not too much below them. So if the Moshel does not conduct himself properly, then what will happen is that they will all learn from him. Kol mesharetav reshaim, they will all be wicked just like him. Rash ve'ish techachim nifgashu me'id einei shnehem Adonai. Also very interesting pasuk. A poor man and a man of deep thoughts. I would not agree with that. Ish techachim is more a man who was going through a hard time. A poor man and an individual who's suffering were visited upon. Hashem enlightens the eyes of both of them. The term ish techachim, I guess, may have various interpretations. But one of them is one who's having a difficult time. He's talking about two poor people. One who was poor all his life. One who was rich and who's lost a lot of money. He went bankrupt. He's ish techachim. Techachim, one of the explanations of techachim is lekabel makot. In other words, is to get hit over the head, not physically, but financially. It's to suffer, to go through a hard time. That is one interpretation. Nevertheless, Shlomo Melech says they meet. Nifgashu. What does it mean, nifgashu? So he says, Me'ir einei shnehem Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu can enlighten their ways. HaKadosh Baruch Hu can show them the way out of their misery. One should never become desperate, in other words, never lose hope because of his situation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings them together, meaning that he brought about the situation to begin with. And he can bring them out of that situation. Me'ir einei Hashem, Hashem will enlighten their eyes and show them the way on how to succeed. The Jew should therefore never give up hope. Another interpretation here is Rash ve'ish techachim nifgashu, when two people meet, each one suffering from something else. Hashem sometimes put them together for what purpose? To show the poor man, you know, you have a lot of troubles, and you're miserable, and you're complaining. I'm going to show you somebody who's worse off than you. And you're going to say, let me hold on to my package, to what I have. I don't want that individual's package. As they say in this country, the grass is greener on the other side. But when you go into the house, you see the trouble that's going on in the house. Even though it's greener, the grass is greener in the whole, you know, they have money, they have cars. The problems that they're going through, you would never wish it on yourself. As the famous story goes, if we all had the choice of choosing for ourselves a package, a peko, as they say in Yiddish, of yisurim, of pain of some sort, everybody would eventually choose the one that he has now and not one somebody else's.
He's used to it.
Not only because he's used to it, he sees that the situation could be harder somewhere, you know, if you were to exchange it with someone else's. Hashem gives us only something that we can handle. So Hashem brings these two together and reminds them that what you have is what's good for you. Okay, next pasuk. I think that will be the last pasuk for today. Melech shofet be'emet dalim kis'o la'ad yikon. Again, he's talking about kings. A king who judges the poor justly, his throne will be established forever. And that is exactly what the Torah says in Parshat Shofetim, talking about kings, that he should not be more arrogant than his brothers. Levilti rum levavo me'achav ulevilti sub min hamitzvah yamin u'shmol, not to deviate from the mitzvot, right or left. For what reason? Not only because you want to do the right thing, but leman yarich yamim mamlachto, so that he should have a long reign. Hu vanav v'kerev Yisrael, he and his children after him, generation after generation. You want to succeed? You want to be in power for a long time? You want your children to take over after you? Just follow the Torah mitzvot. In Bichokotai Telechu is also very straightforward. Am Yisrael, you want to prosper? You want no wars? You want to have a good life where the rain comes down on time? Just follow the mitzvot. You have questions as to why Am Yisrael has suffered? Read Parshat Kitavo. Read Parshat Bechukotai. Read Parshat Nitzavim. It only has to do with our actions, nothing else. So that is his advice to kings, to men in power. Melech shofet be'emet dalim, kiso la'ad yikon. If he judges the poor justly, his throne will be established forever. Why is he talking about judging the poor? It's hard sometimes to judge the poor. Imagine a rich man and a poor man coming to court. Torah has to warn us not to look up to the rich man, because human nature would be, well, the rich man probably is right. The poor man is trying to get the rich man's money. The Torah has to warn the judges, be careful in that kind of a situation where you have rich and poor. It's hard to judge the poor man. You have to be very careful. You don't want to be over compassionate either. He's a poor man. The rich man can afford it anyway. So I'm going to say that the rich man is guilty and the poor man is innocent. You can't do that either. That's corruption. You have to be truthful. You have to be honest. You have to be very, very careful in judging the situation as it is. And why is this important? Not only for the success of the reign of the king, but for another reason. As the rabbis tell us, the world stands on three things. Right? What are they? Anybody remember?
Torah,
Avodah, Gemilut, Chasadim. The world stands on these three. What does that mean? All that means is that the world is created for these three things. If they would not exist, there's no reason for the world to exist. But then there's another Ma'amar Chazal, there's another one that says that for three things the world continues to exist. And that is Aladin, Vala Emet, Vala Shalom. If there is justice, if there is truthfulness, and there is peace. There's no peace, there's war, there's no justice, there's corruption, right? There's no din. You have havoc. And that is why empires fell apart. That is why people suffer. That is why families break up. You know how many families break up? Just for money. Just because of money. Something so silly. Money! The other day I was giving a shiur about the importance of not disconnecting a parent from the breathing tube. Breathing tube, they're a breathing tube.
medical ethics.
Not only are you killing the man or the woman, but you're going to see now, I'm going to tell you a quick story of what could happen. Father was disconnected. He could have lived on a little longer. The children disconnected him. He comes in a dream to one of his kids. Why did you disconnect me? Every moment that I was in the Olam Hazeh, they were removing bundles of sins from me for the suffering that I was going through. So I added on my own, it's not part of the story, maybe they wanted to inherit the money quickly. So that's why they couldn't wait and they just disconnected the two. I don't know what was on their mind, but a lot of people, what's on their mind is money. How to get more money. And if they don't get all the money, they're very unhappy. They're unhappy for the rest of their life. Do you know how many brothers and sisters don't talk to each other? Ever since one of the parents or the two passed away, because one got a little bit more than the other, only because of money. And this is money that we don't even take with us. We leave it behind. Why be so upset about something so silly? Especially when you have some money to survive anyway. You have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You want more, and because of that to make a fight. Everything is min hashamayim, how much one is going to get anyway. So why fight? The fighting will not accomplish anything. On the contrary, it just destroys. It destroys beautiful homes, destroys relationships of people. The world cannot stand. It cannot continue to exist if there's no din, if there's no emet, and there's no shalom. People who are in the business of diamonds, you know how they do business? Handshake. There's some trust. And some people take advantage of that too. They are the corrupt people. We don't need to be like them. We need to learn the lessons of being just, of being righteous, of being kind. And in this way we contribute to a beautiful world, to a world that continues to exist. Aladin v'la emet v'la shalom. Unfortunately for the world, and unfortunately for us, many times in the history of mankind, people, because of selfishness, have been very destructive in their behavior and have massacred many people because of their ideas of religion and the like. And there's nothing we can do about it. That is, human beings have behaved like the animals. But we do have free will, and we must remember that when one reaches Bet Din Shel Mala, he will be judged why he did not exercise his common sense, even without Torah, just common sense of being kind to another human being. Even if he's a goy, he will be judged for it. And obviously that is the value of the lessons that Shlomo Melech is sharing with us, that it's never too late, unless one is a complete ksil or reveal that is beyond repair. If he's learning this book, he probably is not a ksil or a reveal. He's probably a chacham. Baruch Hashem, all of us are chachamim, and it would be a good idea to adapt as much as we can of these lessons. Be'ezrat Hashem, I will see you 2 weeks from now. Next week I won't be around. Be'ezrat Hashem, 2 weeks.